Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Hi, I'm Father Jay Friedel. Welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown, a place where hopefully we have some intelligent discussion every week and some compassionate discussion about different issues that affect us as people of faith here in the greater Joplin area. This morning, my guests are going to be Reverend Dr. Sarah Cheney, who's the pastor of Neosho United Methodist Church, and Sister Diane Langford, who happens to work with me over at St. Peter's Catholic Church. This morning we're going to be talking a little bit about the role of women in the church. And I always laugh and I say, well, why would I do this? Well, sometimes all the men are the ones that talk about the role of women in the church, and that really doesn't make a lot of sense. I'd rather hear it from the women themselves about what that's like. I'm sure that sometimes that has been a little bit of a challenge, and I'm sure like anyone else, it's also sometimes a bit of a joy. But we are going to talk a little bit about the role of women in faith and how we're going to do those things. And we're going to be back in just a few moments after this Mercy Minute. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Angie Saporito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Stephen Meyer, cardiovascular surgeon with Mercy. Dr. Meyer, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about the vein clinic. What is that?
That is an area of the outpatient clinic that we use to treat patients with venous disease. In the past, most of varicose veins and things like that required bigger surgeries in the operating room to treat. Now we have ways of treating these minimally invasively with catheters or with direct injection to the veins that we do here as an outpatient in the office.
So it's fairly simple outpatient procedure?
Fairly simple, yes.
Very good. Do you need to be referred by your physician?
Not necessarily. The patients, if they so wish, can call our office and we can set up an evaluation if they wish.
Very good. So just a phone call to the office, call the number on your screen, and you can get right in.
Welcome back. I'm here this morning with Reverend Dr. Sarah Cheney, who is the pastor of Neosho United Methodist Church, and Sister Diane Langford, who works with me at St. Peter's. Both ministers in the church. Many times I know that through the years, and sometimes I think even still here in our own area, there certainly is a more predominance of male ministers than there are female ministers. How do you feel sometimes about, being in the minority in terms of ministers in the church here in our region?
Once upon a time in this area, I think there were quite a few Sisters of Mercy.
Yes.
And, they were very active in the hospital ministry. They were very active in the educational ministries here. And then there were also some other sisters who did some other things, who did some legal work, lawyer. And I knew them back when I worked at St. Canary in Neosho some 25 years ago. We used to get together quite regularly. And so when I came back to work this time in Joplin and learned that there were I think 4 Sisters of Mercy, it was a little daunting, Jay, because when you don't have a profile, it's very hard for people to catch on to what you are. And I at least spend at least some point of time trying to explain to people what is a nun.
Right.
And instead of getting on with the ministry that I think you pay me for, you spend a lot of time.
Not much, but it's good ministry.
Thank you. But you spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time just explaining the reality. And we're just not very many anymore.
Well, and that was one of the reasons I went after you to try to hire you when I got you, because we do have a shrinking number of women religious in the church, and I grew up around women religious. I mean, they helped raise me, they helped teach me wonderful images to me as to how to work and minister to other people, and I caught that as a child. And part of the reason I caught that was because of the sisters who taught me in school and the ones that I later worked with, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted to go after. I mean, you guys are you're more of an endangered species than we are. And in terms of doing that, I just wanted to make sure that that my kids at St. Peter's, and that our parish had the ability to experience a woman religious. The Sisters of Mercy have been in the area for a long time, but many times, unless you were connected with the high school, one of the other great things that we did was we managed to go out and find a sister to come work in our schools again. And we hadn't had that for many, many years. So, I figure these things I'm up in the percentage. I'm trying to do what I can.
Thank you.
Because I believe in y'all.
Thank you.
But it has been a bit of a challenge. And at least I think they're not surprised. Now, Sarah, you're coming from a tradition, obviously, where you don't have women religious in the, as a religious order of sisters, okay? But you yourself, lifelong Methodist, and grew up, with those role models and things. So how did you get into this?
Well, the difference, I think, 2 points I want to step back.
Sure, go for it.
I think I'm serving in Neosho, and that area has had women in ministry in a variety of roles for a long time. It's interesting that sometimes the more evangelical churches have women in leadership roles. Like Myrna Marble is somebody who is led the church in the Neosho area for a long time, so I really want to sing praises to her.
Great.
And she's Alan Marble's mother, and worked with the Gospel Lighthouse down there, so worked a lot with the poor and changing the world and her little in her smaller sphere there, but making a major difference. Now, it's also true that it's more rare for there to be an ordained clergywoman in the Southwest Missouri than in many locations. So that's been a difference. And one of the funny things is I'll introduce myself, or I made a home visit a couple weeks ago, and said to the person who came to the door that I was Pastor Sarah, and had a little conversation and went inside, and then they don't hear you when you say that you're the pastor. They presume you're the pastor's wife or some other role. They just don't hear that. So I think the role of one's voice, as well as others hearing the audience and how they hear you, is shifts a little bit when you're male or female, and men speak with more authority or are provided more, heard with more authority.
Sure.
So that's an interesting process of getting to where folks can hear you.
Yeah. If I'd have listened with more authority to my dad than my mom, it would not have gone well for me in my home. I just want you to know. I had to listen to both with the same amount of authority. So,
and that's great.
Yeah.
One of the things that is striking to me about the Neosho area, and Joplin might be this way too, it's just I don't know quite yet, but I was the president of the Ministerial Alliance down there.
Wow.
And I thought they were very brave to take on the Catholic nun in that position. And one of the things that people sort of looked to me to support and really bring forward was the kind of work we needed to do together for the poor. Okay. And so we crafted cross lines for the poor. We bought a building. It was the kind of stuff that was a little bit out there, more than they'd done before. And it was, I thought it was an amazing thing that they trusted me with that direction of the work of the Ministerial Alliance.
And that was almost 30 years ago.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
In fact, interestingly, I think 30 years ago, I don't know how Sarah would see this, but there was more openness to women doing interesting and kind of out there type ministerial things, even for nuns. I wish that had continued to grow from that spot, but it did not in the Catholic Church. In fact, there was kind of a diminishment over the last 25 years in the Catholic Church from where we were 30 years ago.
And, I don't want to get into your family, your denominational family's quarrel, but Sister Diane has incredible education and experience and wisdom, and would be a gift in any
Well, she is a gift to us.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, and that's one of the reasons why I went after her and hired her, because we had a mostly a wonderful staff, but they were untrained formally, educationally. And Diane had all these years of experience and things like that. And I know when she came back to the area, I knew she didn't want to work full time, which is good because I couldn't pay somebody full time. But I was able to reach out and say, can you help us part-time? You still have the freedom to be able to do what you want to do and the other ministries that you're working in. But we need somebody to help with religious education. We need somebody to help with adult faith formation. We need someone to help with, helping our people to, kind of dig a little deeper in their spiritual lives. Well, Diane does all that stuff in spades.
She does
probably
all that-
better than I do.
And she preaches really well.
Well, now there is going to
Sorry,
be an
okay.
entertainment. Now that's no.
Meddling.
And I think that, but it's fair. It's a fair thing. And here's what I want to say. Again, we would be in that situation where, in the church, we would say that technically only ordained ministers are the technical preachers. But if people have not listened to Sister Diane when she has given her instructions, those kinds of things. Diane and I teasingly say, we can call them whatever we want, but I know when she's preaching.
Yes.
Because
True.
the Holy Spirit's there and it's coming out. Okay, well, it may not be in our official liturgical setting, but it does happen. Now, it is a limitation.
Well, the reality is that 30 years ago, the church welcomed that. And when I was in the Osho, Father Jim Unterreiner and I had a clear, balanced understanding that rather than run him ragged, there would be times that I would preach.
And there are times, let's face it, when I'm out of town and one of the priests is not available, and you do a communion service or whatever, you give a short instruction on that, and it's fine. Now again, what the funny part is that I'd be in trouble if I called it, quote, preaching.
Yes,
okay,
of course.
Because that's
Okay.
the official rule.
Okay.
But by the very same token, and it is still there on the books, that in certain circumstances, yes, other people can give an instruction. But whether we call it an instruction or whether we call it preaching, I know it's not formally the same thing as when an ordained minister is doing it according to the definition. But if people can't tell when the Spirit's present and when somebody's actually, proclaiming the word to others and sharing that, that's one of those moments that, again, the tension gets us. But I know the reality of that it happens.
Yes. In spite of gender.
In spite of gender. I agree with that. But it's tricky because there are a lot of people who just simply would not, I just know many of my own, in my own denomination, Catholics would just say, oh, you can't call it that, Jay, because, and I'd be like, okay, and I know that. I mean, and you can tell I've had a lot of practice at, walking that fine line, okay? But the reality is, I know when the word's being preached. She preaches to me all the time. And when I'm really smart, I listen.
Do you listen?
When I'm smart, I listen most of the time. Because again, and I just think that this is a reality that sometimes you all, because of your experiences and who you are, can proclaim the word and give it just a little bit of a different twist than I'm able to do because I'm who I am and you're who you are.
Well, and I believe that about decision making as well. To me, it's a deprivation in any community of believers where the only leadership voice they hear is, proclaimed leadership is male, because I think women add so much of a different dimension in decision making. And we have many, many different kinds of experiences that nobody thinks to call, for instance, in our parish, nobody thinks to call on me to see what we might want to do about buildings. And in my background, I have retrofitted an entire building.
Yeah, I know. But and we're gonna come right back to that. This is Faith in Our Hometown. We'll be right back.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
I'm here with Sister Diane Langford, a Catholic sister in the Catholic Church who works with me at St. Peter's, and the Reverend Dr. Sarah Cheney, who is the pastor at Neosho United Methodist Church. We've obviously just been talking a little bit about sometimes looking for the wisdom of those other voices to give us even more perspective.
Well, I'd like
and
to hear a
some of
little
that.
from Sarah
Yep.
on that very
Well,
topic.
the concept that you rose up in my mind was that isn't it always, aren't we always diminished when there's a group of folks who are voiceless in our congregation and
Yes.
are very understanding of what church is, which I think we hold in common,
Right.
that the church is the body of Christ, and that whenever there's a group of folks or a segment of that population that is voiceless, that we are all diminished. I mean, I think that's by definition.
Agreed.
But whether, for whatever reason, so yes, to that, as to what, and there again, it's an understanding of the gifts of the Spirit as to what kinds of, it requires a little more fine tuning of one's ability to discern the gifts that individuals have, whether they understand about buildings or they understand about music or preaching or writing, just whatever their gifts may be, and not letting gender be a barrier to seeing those gifts. So that would be, as a leader and one who needs, because all of our churches very much want to put into play the various gifts that God has put in our congregations to be used, and aren't we falling short by not discerning or not seeing those and putting them in the sometimes unexpected places?
Yeah, that was well said.
It's always a challenge, because in some ways, we're kind of on that edge trying to lead people to understand. One of the things I know, I work with our seminarians, obviously. I've mentioned some of that before to our listeners, our gentlemen who are studying to be priests. And every once in a while, we come to that argument because, of course, the Catholic Church doesn't ordain women, okay?
Really?
Yeah, really, surprise, I know. Yeah. But in that context, sometimes, just say, we get involved in that conversation, and there are some of the arguments that they will use, and I will say, okay, you're on safe ground there. But every once in a while, they'll come up with one that's not very safe to me, because they'll say something, well, Jesus was a man, and again, women can't, portray, Christ to people the same way that we can as men. And I'm just going to go, time out. You are right now out there on the limb and you're sawing and you're about ready, you're going to hit the ground in just a few minutes. And you're going to be in big trouble if you try using that argument. I said, now you just think back a moment in your life. And you think to your mothers and your grandmothers and the other women in the church who've taught you so much. Are you going to look at them with a straight face and say that they didn't show you Jesus along the way? And so, again, there are certain arguments, and I understand that our bishops aren't going anywhere different for the time being, and that's the truth. I mean, so I'd be very disingenuous if I sat here and said, oh yeah, we're going to do that in a few, no, who knows, but I'm just saying. Right now, everybody believes that it can't be done. And right now, we're not talking about it, so it's not going to be done anytime soon. I can guarantee you there. And if many people believe that it's the way that it should be, that it'll never happen. But those are all questions that are going to be for generations down the road, not necessarily for us. But that whole business about not being able to show me Jesus,
Forget that.
that's a real problem.
Don't go there.
Don't
Yeah.
go there. Don't go there.
Well, I think that at least in the Catholic world, there are some glimmers of hope, dim though they might be. I think when Pope Francis put together the committee working on the concerns related to sexual abuse in the church, he was very careful to put significant women on that committee, recognizing what they could bring forward that men would not be bringing forward.
Well, I'm a firm believer in the fact that if the bishops had been consulting women along the way as to how to deal with the problem, we wouldn't have had the short-sightedness that somehow got them into the problem where people were so angry because they'd have been hearing more. I mean, if they'd have asked grandmas and moms, they'd have understood that, okay, we still got to take care of these men who've done stupid and horrible things. We got to also take care of the kids. And we got to take care of them both, and we understand all that. But nowhere would a mother or a grandmother have ever said, well, let's just assign this person somewhere else because they just said, you're not putting any of my kids more day. And I mean, you know, and again, it was, if we'd have been listening to the bigger body of Christ and had more voices in on some of those decision making, I don't think we'd have gotten ourselves worked into some of the stupid corners we got ourselves worked into.
Agreed.
At that point in time. And that to me is one of the strongest examples that I can think of where listening to more voices and the rest of the voices in the church would have been so much more helpful. I mean, those are some of our Catholic tensions. What about the Methodist Church? I mean, do you have some of the same
we have no tension.
None? Oh, good for you. Thanks be to God. That's a good thing.
Wow.
I think in our denomination, they've been ordaining women for nearly as long as I've been alive, or since the early 50s. And so So we've seen a whole wave of leadership women, and there's still a salary gap, there's still an opportunity gap, there's still in some recent literature that's been put out where they've studied how women's role in the church, in the United Methodist Church, there's still a gap between the number of women who are ordained clergy and those who and the percentage of those who are serving as in larger churches. That seems to be where the biggest deficit is serving in larger churches. They've gone, women have been appointed to the higher administrative roles, better paid, or however you would phrase that, but and they serve the smaller more rural and small town parishes, but the larger suburban parishes, churches, are the ones that are less often led by women. So yeah, there's still certainly growing edges, and it's also true that women leave the church because of disappointment or
and we've
lack of
certainly
fairness,
experienced that
justice
too.
issues.
Well,
Yes.
I want to applaud a woman who lives in my building, the Frisco building, who is 87 years old. She's a Methodist pastor, has been for some long time. And what she purposefully does is serves very small churches who cannot afford a pastor. And to me, what a treasure for your community.
Absolutely.
What a treasure. And I love meeting her in the elevator and just hearing how her day was. And
You can say her name, can't you?
I wish I could.
Oh.
I know exactly who she is in the building, but I don't know her name.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but I mean, it's delightful to know somebody who's given her entire life to ministry and at 87 continues to do that.
We'll come back. We'll have the name after the next break.
Okay.
It'll come to us.
Okay.
Mysteriously. That's true. And women, oftentimes that's one of the things about your women clergy is they're going to be honored to serve and serve in many places that other folks won't go. I think that's not always,
Sure.
You can't generalize, but oftentimes that's, they're a little more mobile, so they get appointed to those locations.
I think looking at the figure of the Magdalene, you know, she went to the tomb when nobody else would go.
The guys were chicken.
Everybody else had chickened
right.
out. And she went when nobody else would go.
Because it needed to be done.
Because the job needed to be checked on.
Yep.
And I think that piece of womanhood is an amazing gift to the church. I don't mean Catholic Church, Methodist, the church.
I don't think it's a surprise that he appeared to the women first either.
Oh, I don't either.
No.
You know, I don't think that's.
Right.
I don't think that. I think there's something there. You know, and
They
that,
were
and they were
there.
the ones that said. Yeah, they were the ones that were there. Okay.
Right.
And the men were just kind of locked in a room, cowering. You know, and
And
they had to go with-
strategizing big things.
I don't think at that point in time. I don't think they could have been
I
strategizing
think they were.
much.
An
I think they
exit
were
plan.
strategizing staying alive.
Or getting out of town
Right.
quick. Yeah, I think that probably would have been the only thing that had been strategizing at that point in time.
But the women
still.
knew that the body had to be taken care of.
Right.
That there was
Right.
work to be done, and they just were practical about it and took care of
Well, men are, I'll say this, I say it in my congregation all the time, is men are babies. Okay? And you guys are tough.
We won't tell them you said that.
No, they hear it from me all the
They do
time.
hear it.
It's
Oh,
just
okay,
like, it's
okay,
not,
okay.
I mean, it's just like, it is no surprise that, like, for example, our widows group that does so much for the parish and does those things, I think it's in God's design, again, that the women usually are the ones that survive because the men really, most of the time, can't hack it. And the women do. The women just figure out what else they have to do. They dig down deep. They find that inner strength, okay? And they just figure out, how am I going to move forward and to do this whole thing? And they figure out a way to make it happen, and they do it.
True enough.
And that to me seems to cut across every single denomination there is. I don't care whether we're talking about Catholic, whether we're talking about Methodist, whether we're talking about Presbyterian, whether we're talking about whatever. It is just an important thing. We got a minute left for our next break. Any other thing you wish you'd said during this section?
Well, there was the story about the woman who washed Jesus' feet or anointed them with the perfume, and they were those who said it needed to be spent. That was a large gift that needed to be spent on the poor. Sometimes the women are the ones who bring the beauty and make sure that the aesthetics of the church continue.
Yeah.
And they bring a dimension of vision that is past the right here in front of you spot, which is sorely needed.
The beyond what must be done to the level of beauty and aesthetically pleasing that makes it all more attractive and better place.
Well, ladies, we have got to take a break here, but I thank you. We'll be right back after this Mercy Minute. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm Angie Saporito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Krishna Kosaru. Dr. Kosaru, what do you do with Mercy?
I'm a new pediatrician who started recently with Mercy, and
So-
it's been only like 2 weeks since I started here with Mercy.
Mercy Pediatrics,
Mercy
so
Pediatrics,
part of
yes.
Mercy Kids.
Yes,
And you're new to Joplin.
yes.
And where is your office located?
My office is located in 3126 South Jackson Avenue.
Here at Jackson Street, so
Jackson
not
Street.
inside the new hospital.
No.
All right, and you are accepting new patients here.
Yes, we are accepting new patients here, and Dr. Chilton will also be coming here twice a week. So we both are accepting new patients.
Dr. Barbara Chilton
Yes.
is also going to be joining you. Wonderful. So if you'd like to make an appointment and join us here at Mercy Pediatrics at Jackson Street Clinic, you can call the number on your screen or visit mercy.net for more information.
Well, this morning we've been discussing the role of women in the church or in the churches, and a treasure they are for all of us. I do want to give a little shout out to Diane's friend, we think is Crystal Wicks, who lives in the same building with Sister Diane. Again, an 87-year-old woman who evidently has been given witness by being a pastor, and especially in smaller churches. We've been talking about the fact that sometimes there is, and still the way we manage the churches, a stained glass ceiling. Sometimes it's difficult for people to get beyond, but I will also say that one of the things that we don't dare stop to appreciate and cherish is the role of women in the church, and the fact that women are over half of us. It's something we got to continue to struggle with and contend with, because you guys are here and it's part of who we are. That's one more thing about faith in our hometown. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. here on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.